You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, let's go ahead and get started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. Really excited to introduce our guest today. And this is one of those days when I didn't ask how the last name is pronounced, so I'm going to butcher it. We have Daniella Morgan-Pascualvaca. Something like that. How do you pronounce that?
That was actually the best first time try I have ever heard. It is perfect. If you had connected it and, said it kind of more streamlined, it would have been perfect. Yeah. My name is Daniella Morgan-Pascualvaca.
Oh, so it's just like it's written.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Look at you, buddy. I'm proud of you.
Daniela is a fourth-year undergraduate student in the University of Chicago studying biology and business economics. She is a director of growth and community at Mella Pet Care. The guests that were on this podcast before, they're creating the devices that help to measure different things within our industry, as well as she's a host of Mella Moment, a pet health podcast. Welcome to the show, Daniela.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's a great opportunity. I love it.
So, how did you get into? Well, two things. First of all, the director of growth and community is a very interesting role. Is this something that grew on you, or that was something that they were looking for and you applied for?
No, so it's definitely something that grew on me. I actually applied as an intern through the University of Chicago. And so I was just kind of lumped in as a regular growth hacker intern along with about three other people my specific quarter. And what I realized was that I love doing everything on the business side, and I had no idea what was going on the tech side. And so what I wanted to do was, help out with social media, send email newsletters, reach out to the community, and everyone else there at Mella Pet Care was like, yeah, run with it and do it. And so that's how I got that title. That's how I went from growth hacker intern to director of growth and community. Honestly, that's kind of a buzzword title. You can call me really anything, but that's officially what it is. And it's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, and that these sort of terms are used more and more, but in a cool company. So, growth hacker. Can you tell us more about what that is and what does growth hacker do? What is the job description for that?
So that's funny because I was officially a growth hacker for about a month before they gave me more stuff and they were like, hey, want to try these other things. But initially, when I joined the team, it was because I have an experience in the vet world. In high school, for 4 years, I was a vet assistant. And so I applied saying, hey, I know you guys are a startup that you deal with pet products, and a lot of you guys have business experience, but I have worked at vet clinics. How can I help? And so they said, yeah, bring that experience, bring that point of view, and kind of solve problems using that experience and kind of, dig into it as a vet assistant would. And so kind of tackle things from that side rather than from the business side. And so while I do not know how to officially describe growth hacker, that was just me kind of like tinkering away at little problems.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it, and I think that the podcast is the result of growth hacking. Essentially, what if I were to define it, it's basically how to do marketing with no money. So essentially, what are those tools that you can use as a startup to actually do marketing at scale with a minimal expense? And we kind of had to do it in SmartFlow. We had to do well. We had more budget in VIS, but that's essentially what it is. And so one of those things that you developed was the podcast. So I thought it would be interesting to dig in because we've been doing this for almost 2+ years, Shawn, and three. Oh, shut up! You're not that old. I thought you were younger. Okay, and they so now we're about 150 episodes in, and it feels so smooth because we have a team that is doing it on the background. I know you're doing it all by yourself. You're not like us slackers. So, can you tell us how hard it is? So, because everybody starts the podcast, and some people are thinking about starting a podcast. So, how hard it is to go from I'm thinking of doing the podcast to actually doing it, and what are the secret sort of 5 secret things on the podcasting from Daniella.
Yeah, so I would actually say that to start the podcast, it's not hard at all. But to kind of take it one step further and put that effort in, that's when it kind of hits. Because the way I started was that my boss was like, hey, here's a brand. The brand was Just Fred. Tennille Teague makes some dog accessory brands in New York. He was like, talk to her, record it, and post it. And so the way it went was that we kind of just got on a Zoom call. We stared at each other. I asked some very basic questions. She answered them. We lost internet connection about 5 times. All in all, I ended the
You had
meeting.
those?
Yeah, I opened GarageBand and I had like 5 minutes of worthy audio. And none of it went together because of the connection and like the way that I had phrased the questions. I was like, wow, this is really bad. But I posted it anyway. Kind of got a little, like, very minimal traction on social media. And I just kept getting guests that I had worked with previously at Mella, anyone. Some people had just sent emails asking about the product. Some people I found on LinkedIn, and I said, hey, do you guys want to talk to me? And from there, I just developed a better style. And so I guess if we really want to break it down into 5, I don't know if I can come up with 5. That's kind of putting me on the spot here.
Don't worry, we'll help you.
We'll do 3 amazing from you and 2 shitty ones from Shawn.
Hey, now, come on.
Number 1 to start is just utilize LinkedIn and like don't be afraid of it. That's what I did is, I said, hey, this person is developing this really cool product. I reached out and I was like, I'm starting this podcast. Do you want to hang out with me and have a chat? Number 2 would be take their advice. I, for some reason, was like very oddly tyrannical when I began the podcast. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, we have to do it this way. And so the guests would get on the Zoom and they'd be like, okay, what about video? What about lighting? And I was like, follow my rules. And after a while, I was like, what am I doing? Like, those aren't even my rules. And so I kind of opened it up and made it more of a two-way stream. And I said, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. What do you suggest? And then what I realized from there is, number 3 would be, let's see here, post on social media. That's always a good thing. It's like, regardless of how many followers you have, it doesn't matter if you get 1 like, 5,000 likes. A good place to start is just to say, hey, here's a project that I'm starting. Do you guys want to check it out? And I don't know if we could like plug other companies here, but I'm a big fan of Anchor. That's how I started. It's a free platform. I just uploaded my audio that I had edited on GarageBand completely free on the computer, completely free up in the cloud. And I just sent it out and it went up to Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
I think, yeah, there's number 4. And then number 5, I would say, is probably just consistency, right? And we were talking about that at the start of the podcast before we started. And that's the thing that we've found. And I mean, how many episodes are you in now, Daniella?
So it's Wednesday and we're about to send out episode 62.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I remember when me and Ivan hit the 100 mark, and I think we both looked at each other and like, wow, we've been doing this like every week now for 100 weeks or whatever it was. One of the other things that we found a lot of value in, we had some advice early on, and it was like, record your first 10 episodes before you actually upload them. And we sat down in a room and called all of our friends and did 10 episodes. And, by episode number 10, we kind of had a bit of a rhythm, and we were lucky enough. We did the first 10 episodes kind of face to face in the same room, and kind of co-hosting a podcast is a bit challenging. I mean, you look at like the two of us, we're both excitable. I think that would be a good word to use for us, Ivan. Maybe you a little bit more than me. But, it was hard for us to find our rhythm and like, how do we ask questions without cutting each other off? And we still do it a little bit, but like now it's just so second nature. We just kind of roll with it. But it's amazing what you learn in the first 10 episodes. And I guess that's a great question for you. What did you learn in the first, 5-10 episodes? And how did you kind of find your rhythm?
Yeah, so I was definitely in an interesting position because it was just me. I didn't have a terribly bald co-host with me on the show.
Nice. She did insert that one. That's good.
That was for Ivan, everybody, just in case you didn't understand.
And so while I see a lot of, benefits of having someone to go back and forth with, I did have to do a lot of it on my own, which is why I kind of hinted at this earlier that I really leaned towards my guests. And I said, let's see, would you guys like to record with video? Would you guys like to have a post on social media? How many questions would you guys like to answer? Would you guys like to write the questions yourself, or would you prefer if I did? And so it was definitely a lot of trial and error in the beginning, is to just kind of get it at least to like a perfect length. I kind of reached 20 minutes as a general goal, but of course my first one wasn't 20 minutes, my second one wasn't 20 minutes. And eventually I just kind of got to a point where I knew how many questions to ask. And so at least what I learned is that, don't be afraid of not hitting like a perfect goal. The first 10 do not need to be perfect. You definitely will learn your style, and your style will be refined over time. But the idea is to just kind of jump in head first, and instead of kind of sitting in a corner by yourself trying to figure out how to do it, just talk to everyone around you and see what advice they have for you.
No, 100%. I like a couple of things that you said. The style, I remember we were actually at Talkatoo headquarters in
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
yeah, when we recorded the first episode, we got feedback from Sean's dev team, and they told us we got feedback. We said, "Can you tell us what you like, what you didn't like?" They did mention that they liked the banter sort of between the two of us, so we maintained that sort of style of me making fun of Sean.
And me reciprocating.
And him trying to, yeah. And so another thing that you mentioned that was really cool is that getting feedback. So Justin Lee schooled us.
Oh
That
my
was like
gosh.
an episode 4 or 5. She just
Got
was
our
like,
ass
she had
handed
it.
to us.
Oh yeah, she had the microphone, she had the style, she had like the soft room. We were like, holy, we're newbies here. But that, we upped our game after that. We bought the microphones and some stuff like that. So that's important. Equipment is important because when you're here, some of our episodes at the beginning, people were like, content is good, but Jesus, guys, can you like not do it through like, some
Your free
microphone?
headset that came with your cell phone.
Yeah, that rubs on your collar and like all that stuff. So that's important. Length, I agree with that. And then one couple more things that I wanted to add. Don't let your guests to read. Absolutely, by no circumstances, because people come prepared. Perfectionists come prepared specifically, and then they read, and you can really hear when the podcast is scripted. So I shout out to our head of people at Galaxy, Lauren. She came to our Consolidate That podcast, and she had thesis, and then she had like every question, every answer written out, and we are all in the same Google Doc. And as we started recording, I go delete the whole file, just killed. She hated me for that, but it turned out a good episode. Like she was talking from the heart, and I'm like, did you have to actually look it up when you made the note? She's like, no, I know it. And I'm like, well, then speak from knowing, not from writing. And it worked really well. Another one that helped us a lot is, like you said, your network. Just start, with the people that you know. People get a lot of requests for podcasts, but I don't think that people are sort of have a podcast fatigue just yet. There's a lot of them, but people are willing to talk about their story, their products, and it's sort of a free exposure. So it's kind of a weird new community developed. It's not only one or two really cool podcasts. It's just sort of this gesture that someone invited you invite someone else, and it's sort of the exchange. And I wouldn't be surprised that now there's more podcasts produced than listened to. So I think that might be the case. And then another thing that really works for us is anchoring at the end for the next episode. That is what we started doing from the very beginning, and that was really, really, and I'm afraid to say that it was Sean's idea, but maybe it was. So so we always ask about the book, TED Talk, and stuff like that, or the next guest, and that what helped us to do it in perpetuity. So that was really good. And then another thing that I learned from Consolidate That, which is not as popular as this podcast that I'm participating in, is if you don't have a guest, and if it is a co-hosted podcast, do an episode between the two of you. And there are topics that you can discuss, and if you have a good cadence and a good rhythm, then you can do it the two of you.
Yeah, back to our guest. Let's not make it about just you, this podcast. So Daniella, what would you say your biggest learning has been kind of in the podcasting world, and what are you maybe most proud of? 2 questions for you.
I guess to start with, the thing that I'm most proud of is that this is kind of a one-woman operation. What I really like about that is just that I've been able to, stay organized. And, I could kind of, I don't know if now is the right time, but kind of walk through the funnel for people who maybe want to start out on their own and know, how to take it from point A all the way to the end.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think, one of the things that I'll say just before you say that is, when we started this podcast almost 3 years ago now, we had no idea what we were doing. And it's been such an incredible journey. And I think the more podcasts there are, the better, because not everybody wants to listen to me and Ivan. We know that, but we want to listen to new content and we want
What?
to hear about, yeah, it's true. So yeah, go ahead. Walk us through how you think, what's the best way to get started. And I want to encourage anybody that's listening or anybody that's listened to our show to reach out to all of us if we can help, because I think the more of us that are doing this, the better it is for the profession. And it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to build community. So over to you.
Yeah, so I would say my general funnel is, I mentioned that a lot of the guests that I have were sent over from the Mella team. But let's just assume, that you don't have a team like that to back you up. You could find all of your people on LinkedIn. Okay, great. Like you found someone you like. Now the next step is that you reach out, you say, you maybe like send a few episodes or like some samples, and you have like kind of this back and forth where they might be interested in being on a podcast. Maybe they've never been there. From there, I learned that people are kind of nervous about being on podcasts,
Yep.
And so what I started sending was just a very short PDF being like, don't worry about it. I will edit the podcast. This isn't live. Just small things to kind of ease the worries, to say, if you want to stop in the middle of the episode and take your time, you can do that. And then from there, right now, what I would suggest to start off is to record on Zoom. Zoom, for the most part, is free. It's perfect because you can see someone's face. And so even if you don't record with video, just being able to talk face to face is perfect. It's a lot weirder when cameras are off and you're like, well, is the other person like responding to this? Are they smiling? Do they hate it? And then Zoom will record it. It will give you the audio file. Then another beautiful starting point is the free GarageBand service. You have that file, you can edit it, you can add a small little intro if you'd like, a small little outro, maybe eventually, not necessarily your first few podcasts, but once you're comfortable, add some music, maybe add some interruptions in the middle. And then I keep plugging these free softwares that I think that, I think that's great for people who don't know how to do it. But then, of course, yeah, you add it to Anchor, and Anchor will put it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And the most important part here is that this is when you call every family member and friend you have, and you're like, hey, I have a podcast. Can you rate it on Apple Podcasts? Something that everyone needs to do. And then you post it on your personal social media. And then what I like to do is to just kind of tie a final bow on everything, is to reach out to your guest and send them everything. Say, here are the links to where it's available. Thank you for having me. Maybe have some referrals. And that is what I have found to be kind of a good circular process. Obviously, since I am the only person doing this project, it might be different for you guys who have a whole team. But for people who want to start off as just one person, I would say that's just the easiest funnel or circular process that you could take.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, when you listen to a podcast and you hear the production value and the quality and all of the stuff that goes behind it, it's, you eventually arrive there. I think it took us 10 episodes or 20 episodes maybe before we invested and bought proper microphones and that type of thing. But you get that feedback, and then you ingest the feedback, you listen, and you just kind of keep going. But let's go back over to benefits. Like, so for you individually, I'm sure your network is growing way more than maybe even thought it would be at this point in your career. You're still in university, but you now have 60 episodes underneath you. What's it been like to kind of have all of these conversations across this great industry, which is the pet health industry?
Oh, it's been absolutely amazing because the way I like to see the podcast is at least mine specifically, is that it's kind of a two-sided coin where I do like to talk about brands and, what they're up to or what innovations are cool. But at the same time, I want to talk about, how does that connect to pet health and wellness? I know that a signature question that I ask all of my guests on my podcast is, what does pet health and wellness mean to you in today's day and age? And so in order to kind of step away from a promotional podcast where it's just, hey, buy my product, it's how does that tie into the pet health world? And so I've just had this insane array of guests that not only talk about what's really cool and up and coming in the vet or pet health industry, it really gets down to how they feel about pets. And so it's insanely heartwarming because they'll say, yeah, I'm creating this product and this and this. And then I go, okay, but why? And they'll say, it's because I love my cat, or like I want to save dogs or something like that. And so there's a lot of passion in this industry that I have noticed and that I've learned from all 60 plus of my guests. And so I've loved having every single one of them on my show just to learn all of that about them.
Awesome. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for giving these tips to our listeners. And the usual two questions at the end. Number one, is there a book, a TED Talk, a video, or anything that you recently read, listened, or watched that inspired you?
Yeah, so actually when you asked this question initially so I could think about it, the first book that came to mind just immediately was The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. I have not read that book since the 10th grade, but I think the fact that it was the first thing that popped into my head really says something about how long the book has stuck with me. And so, can I really say what it's about? I don't really remember. I know that it was about twins growing up in India and how specific love laws affected them. But definitely check that out if you haven't read it already. If you didn't read it in a 10th grade English class like me, now's the time.
And then the last question is another innovator that you think we should have on our podcast.
Yeah, so I recently had Shannon Falconer from Because Animals, and just the way that she framed the pet health industry and food and cultured meat was really just mind-blowing to me. So I learned a lot about both science and fluffy pets.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinary-innovation podcast.com. See you next week.